3 years ago, Alpha King Dustin threw his mate out into the unforgiving winter snow, convinced by a falsified medical report that she was a broken vessel, incapable of bearing the air his lineage demanded. He didn't just reject her, he erased her. Today the royal hall is filled with the scent of pine and expensive champagne for the pup ceremony of his new son. Dustin sent an invitation to his rejected mate, not out of kindness but out of cruelty. He wanted her to witness his happiness and her own failure. He wanted to see her break. But when the heavy oak doors groaned open, the woman who entered wasn't the weeping girl he exiled. She was a queen in her own right, and she wasn't alone. Clinging to her hand was a toddler with Dustin's own distinctive steel-grey eyes. The envelope was made of heavy cream-colored cardstock, embossed with the gold crest of the obsidian moon pack. It sat on the glass coffee table like a dormant landmine. Lorelei stared at it, the steam from her mug of tea curling into the air, doing little to warm the sudden chill in her apartment. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. The entire supernatural community in Seattle, and likely the whole West Coast, had been buzzing about it for weeks. King Dustin was holding a pup ceremony. It was the ultimate celebration of fertility and legacy. It was the day an alpha presented his heir to the moon goddess and the pack elders. For Dustin, it was the day he would finally prove to the world that he had done the right thing by discarding her. "Mummy, are you okay?" The soft voice broke Lorelei's trance. She turned to see Noah standing in the doorway of his bedroom. At 3 years old, he was already tall for his age, his dark hair a messy mop that refused to be tamed. But it was his eyes, steel grey, flecked with shards of silver, that made Lorelei's heart ache every time she looked at him. They were his father's eyes. "I'm fine, baby," Lorelei said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She set her mug down and opened her arms. Noah ran into them, burying his face in her neck. He smelled like baby shampoo and innocence. "Just thinking about work." "Is that a party letter?" Noah asked, pulling back to point a chubby finger at the envelope. "Something like that," she whispered. She picked up the envelope. It wasn't just a generic invite. The calligraphy on the front was hand-addressed to Lorelei Tate. The rogue, not former Luna, not even her family name, just the rogue. It was a calculated insult, a reminder of the status he had reduced her to. Her mind flashed back to that night 3 years ago. The sterile smell of the pack hospital, the look of cold disgust on Dustin's face as he threw the medical files at her chest. Barren, he had spat the word, hanging in the air like a curse. "My line ends with me if I stay with you. A king cannot have a dry womb for a mate. Get out." She had tried to argue, tried to tell him that they should see a specialist outside the pack, but he wouldn't listen. He had already been spending time with Felicity, a duke's daughter with wide hips and a reputation for fertility. The rejection had been swift, brutal, and public. Lorelei ripped the envelope open. Inside the card read, "King Dustin and Queen Felicity request your presence at the presentation of their son, the Crown Prince Lucas. Come and witness the future of the kingdom." At the bottom, in Dustin's own sharp, jagged handwriting, was a postscript. "So you can see what a real Luna looks like." She felt a tear prick her eye, but she angrily brushed it away. She wasn't that girl anymore. She wasn't the 20-year-old who believed love conquered all. She was 23, the owner of a successful boutique in the human sector, and the mother of a very powerful, very secret alpha child. Her phone buzzed. It was Gabriel. Gabriel had been the beta of a neighboring pack, but he had left his position to help Lorelei when he found her wandering the border, half frozen and pregnant 3 years ago. He had been her rock, her business partner and the closest thing Noah had to a father figure, though they had never crossed the line into romance. "Did you get it?" Gabriel's voice was low. "I did," Lorelei replied, her voice hardening. "Burn it, Lorelei. Don't give him the satisfaction. He's baiting you. He wants to see you miserable, so he can justify what he did." Lorelei looked at Noah, who was now playing with a toy truck on the rug. She looked at the strong, straight line of his back, the power already radiating from him even at this young age. "He called me the rogue Gabriel. He wrote a note telling me to come see what a real Luna looks like." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a low growl. "I'll kill him." "No," Lorelei said, a sudden icy calm settling over her. "You won't, and I won't burn it." She stood up, smoothing the fabric of her skirt. For 3 years she had hidden. She had protected Noah from the politics and the violence of the royal court. She had feared that if Dustin knew about Noah, he would take him away. But Dustin had made a mistake. He had assumed she was weak. He had assumed she was broken. And by inviting her to mock her, he had given her the one thing she needed an entrance. "I'm going Gabriel," she said. "Lorelei, it's dangerous. If he sees Noah—" "He's going to see Noah," Lorelei interrupted. "He's going to see exactly what he threw away. He wanted an heir, he has one. But this heir doesn't belong to the king. He belongs to the rogue." "You're going to start a war," Gabriel warned, though there was a hint of admiration in his tone. "He started the war when he threw me in the snow," Lorelei said, her eyes flashing gold as her wolf surfaced for a brief second. "I'm just going to finish it." The royal hall of the Obsidian Moonpack was a masterpiece of architectural intimidation. High vaulted ceilings, chandeliers dripping with crystals and banners of black and gold hanging from every pillar. Tonight it was packed to capacity. Alphas from visiting territories, high-ranking dignitaries, and the elite of the Werewolf Society mingled holding flutes of champagne. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the underlying musk of wolves posturing for dominance. At the head of the room on a raised dais sat King Dustin. He looked older than Lorelei remembered. The lines around his mouth were deeper, his shoulders broader but tenser. He wore a tuxedo of midnight blue, a gold sash across his chest. Beside him sat Felicity. She was undeniably beautiful with cascading blonde hair and a figure that filled out her silk gown perfectly. But she looked tired, anxious. She kept glancing at Dustin, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted the blanket around the bundle in her arms, the new Crown Prince Lucas. "She's nervous," Weston Dustin's beta muttered as he stood by the throne. "She should be," Dustin replied, taking a heavy swig of his whiskey. "This ceremony cements her position. If the boy cries, or if his aura is weak, the elders will talk." "And the guest list?" Weston asked tentatively. "Did she RSVP?" Dustin smirked. "She didn't. She's probably crying in some hovel clutching that invite. I just wanted her to know. I wanted her to feel it. Was that wise, my king, to provoke her? She is a barren rogue Western. She is nothing. Provoking her is like kicking a pebble. It has no consequence." Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the far end of the hall groaned. The sound of the orchestra faltered. The chatter in the room died down, replaced by a confused murmur. The ceremony wasn't supposed to start for another 10 minutes, and the doors were supposed to remain closed until the presentation. The doors swung wide open, revealing the dark night outside. A gust of wind blew into the hall, carrying a scent that hit Dustin like a physical blow. It was the scent of winter berries, vanilla, and ozone. A scent he hadn't smelled in 3 years. But beneath it, there was something else, something powerful, ancient, and undeniably alpha. A silhouette stepped into the light. Lorelei. She wasn't wearing the rags of a rogue. She was wearing a gown of blood-red velvet that hugged every curve of her body, with a slit that went up to her thigh and a neckline that plunged daringly low. It was a dress designed for war. Her hair, once kept in modest braids, flowed in loose dark waves down her back. She wore diamonds at her throat, diamonds that looked real. A collective gorge ripped through the hall. Is that the rejected mate? Someone whispered. She looks, goddess above, she looks magnificent. Dustin froze. His glass shattered in his hand, whiskey and blood dripping onto the floor. He stared at her, unable to breathe. She was supposed to be withered. She was supposed to be broken. Lorelei walked forward. She didn't walk with her head down. She glided her chin high, her eyes locking onto Dustin's across the expanse of the room. But as she stepped further into the light, the room went deadly silent. Because she wasn't walking alone. Walking beside her, his small hand gripping her fingers, was a little boy in a miniature tuxedo. Dustin's heart hammered against his ribs. He stood up, ignoring the gasps of his court. He looked at the child. The boy walked with a confidence that was unnatural for a toddler. He looked around the room, not with fear, but with curiosity. And then the boy looked up at the dais. Dustin felt the air leave his lungs. The boy had his nose. He had his jawline. And most damning of all, he had the obsidian eyes, the mark of the royal line. Lorelei stopped in the center of the hall just below the dais. The silence was so profound that the rustle of Felicity's dress sounded like a thunderclap. "You invited me, Dustin," Lorelei said, her voice clear and melodious, carrying to every corner of the room without the need for a microphone. "You wanted me to see your heir." She looked at the bundle in Felicity's arms, then down at the strong, standing boy beside her. "It seemed only polite." Lorelei continued, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "That I bring mine." Felicity stood up, her face draining of color. "Who is that?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Who is that child?" Lorelei didn't look at Felicity. She kept her eyes on Dustin. "Hello, Dustin," she said, softly. "Meet Noah, the son you said I could never have." Dustin stumbled down the first step of the dais, his eyes wide, his wolf howling in his mind. "Mine, pup, mine!" "Impossible," Dustin rasped. "You are Barren. The doctors. The tests. The doctors you paid." Lorelei countered, her voice sharpening. "Or the doctors Felicity recommended." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. All eyes turned to the Queen. Felicity clutched her baby tighter, looking like a trapped animal. "He is a bastard," Felicity yelled. "A rogue bastard. Guards, remove them." 2 guards stepped forward, but before they could reach Lorelei, a low, menacing growl rumbled from the child. Noah stepped in front of his mother. His tiny hands balled into fists. His eyes glowed a bright, luminescent silver. It was an alpha command, from a 3-year-old. The guards froze their wolves, forcing them to submit. They dropped to one knee, heads bowed. The room erupted into chaos. An alpha command of that strength was rare. For a toddler to possess it meant only one thing. His blood was not just royal. It was pure. Dustin looked from the guards to the boy. He felt a pull in his chest, a biological tether that couldn't be faked. This was his son. "He commanded them," Dustin whispered, shock replacing his anger. "He commanded the royal guard." Lorelei placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, calming him. She looked up at Dustin, her expression cold as ice. "Happy pup ceremony, Dustin," she said. "I hope you enjoy yours, because I am certainly enjoying mine." She turned to leave the red dress swirling around her legs. "Stop!" Dustin roared, his voice shaking the chandeliers. "That is my son. You cannot take him." Lorelei stopped. She didn't turn around. She just tilted her head slightly. "You have no son with me, King Dustin," she said. "You rejected me. You declared me barren. By your own laws, you have no claim to anything my womb produces." "I am the king," Dustin shouted, descending the stairs, desperation clawing at him. "I can revoke the rejection." Lorelei turned then, and the look in her eyes was enough to stop him in his tracks. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You can try," she said, "but you'll have to go through his father first." From the shadows near the entrance, a figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, with scars running down his neck, and a dangerous aura that rivaled Dustin's own. Gabriel stepped into the light, moving to stand beside Lorelei. He placed a possessive hand on her waist and glared at the king. "We're leaving," Gabriel said, his voice a low rumble, "unless you want to turn this celebration into a funeral." Dustin stood frozen as his rejected mate, his enemy, and his secret son walked out the door, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his own arrogance. The silence that followed Lorelei's departure was heavier than the stone walls of the castle. The royal hall moments ago, filled with the clinking of crystal and the hum of celebration, was now a tomb of awkward whispers. Dustin stood at the foot of the dais, his chest heaving. The image of the boy, Noah, was branded onto his retinas. The grey eyes, the unruly hair, the sheer raw power that had forced trained royal guards to their knees. That was not the power of a rogue. That was the blood of the Obsidian Kings. "Everyone out," Dustin said. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. The guests didn't need to be told twice. They scurried for the exits, their silks and furs rustling as they fled the inevitable explosion of the Alpha King's temper. Within minutes, the vast hall was empty, save for Dustin, Felicity, Beta Weston, and the royal guards who were slowly getting back to their feet, looking ashamed and confused. Dustin turned slowly to face Felicity. She was still sitting on her throne, clutching baby Lucas. Her face was pale, her knuckles white. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together wrong. "You knew," Dustin said. It wasn't a question. "I didn't," Felicity cried, standing up too quickly. Lucas let out a thin, wavering wail. "Dustin, she's a witch. She used a glamour spell. That child. He can't be yours. You saw the medical reports. She is a dry husk." Dustin ascended the stairs, step by step, a predator stalking prey. "A glamour spell. A 3-year-old child commanded my personal guard to kneel, Felicity. Magic cannot mimic the Alpha command. Only blood can do that." He stopped inches from her. He could smell the sour scent of her fear, tainting her usual perfume of roses. "Get Dr. Albright," Dustin barked over his shoulder to Weston. "Now!" "Dustin, please," Felicity pleaded, reaching for his arm. "Don't do this. Look at our son. Look at Lucas. He is your heir." Dustin looked down at the bundle in her arms. Lucas was crying, his face red and scrunching. Dustin felt a pang of affection. It was his child, after all, but he felt no pull, no ancient tether. Unlike the moment he saw Noah, where his very soul seemed to snap into place, looking at Lucas felt like looking at a stranger. "I wonder," Dustin whispered, a cold realization dawning on him. "Why has Lucas never shifted? Why is his aura so faint?" "He's a late bloomer," Felicity shrieked. "My father said—" "Your father," Dustin snarled. Duke Harrington! The doors burst open again, and Weston dragged in Dr. Albright. The royal physician was an older man, balding and typically composed, but now he was sweating profusely. He took one look at Dustin's face and his knees buckled. "My king," Albright stammered. Dustin didn't shout. He didn't roar. He spoke with a deadly quiet calm that was far more terrifying. "3 years ago you presented me with a file stating that Lorelei Tate had a malformed uterus and 0 viable eggs. You told me she was biologically incapable of conception." Yes, my king. The data. I just saw a boy," Dustin interrupted. "A boy with my eyes and my voice who shares her blood. Explain that to me, doctor. How does a barren woman produce an alpha of that magnitude?" Albright's eyes darted to Felicity. It was a micro-expression, a split-second glance, but Dustin saw it. "She paid you," Dustin said. "No," Albright gasped. "Weston," Dustin commanded. "Take the doctor to the dungeons. Start with his fingers. If he doesn't talk by the time he loses the 3rd one, move to the toes." "Wait," Albright screamed, falling to the floor. "Mercy, I'll tell you everything." Felicity gasped, stepping back, clutching Lucas to her chest. "Speak," Dustin ordered. "It was the Duke." Albright sobbed, his face pressed into the carpet. "Duke Harrington, and the future Queen. They came to me the week before you were set to finalize the mating bond with Lorelei. They said the pack needed a strong alliance. They said Lorelei was a nobody, a weakness." Dustin felt his world tilting. "So you faked it. We swapped the samples," Albright confessed. "The ultrasound, the blood work. It belonged to a cancer patient in the human hospital. Lorelei was perfectly healthy. She was actually in the early stages of pregnancy when you rejected her." The silence that followed was absolute. Dustin felt like he had been gutted. He remembered the day he threw her out. It was snowing. She had been crying, begging him to believe her, clutching her stomach. He had thought she was clutching it out of pain from the rejection. She had been protecting their child. "I exiled my mate," Dustin whispered, his voice cracking, "and I sent my unborn son to die in the winter." He turned to Felicity. The beautiful, noble woman he had chosen for the good of the pack now looked like a monster. "You stole my life," Dustin said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You stole my mate. You stole my son's birthright." "I did it for us," Felicity yelled, dropping the facade. Her face twisted into a snarl. "For the pack you needed power, Dustin. My father gave you the Southern Alliance. What could she give you? Cheap cotton and a pretty smile. I gave you an army." "You gave me a lie," Dustin roared, his control finally snapping. The glass windows of the hall shattered outward from the force of his voice. "Guards!" Dustin bellowed. "Confine Felicity to the North Tower. She is not to leave her quarters. And bring me the head of Duke Harrington before sunrise." "You can't do this," Felicity screamed as the guards seized her. "I am the Queen. Lucas is the Prince. We will see about that," Dustin muttered as she was dragged away. Her screams echoing down the corridor. He turned to Weston. "Find Lorelei. Find out where she is staying. I don't care if you have to tear this city apart, brick by brick." "What are you going to do, Alpha?" Weston asked, fear in his eyes. Dustin walked to the shattered window, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there was the woman he had wronged and the son he didn't know he had. "I'm going to beg," Dustin said. Lorelei's boutique, the Gilded Cage, was located in the upscale neutral zone of the city, an area where humans and shifters coexisted. The shop was closed, the lights dimmed, but inside the tension was palpable. Lorelei sat on a velvet armchair, watching Noah sleep on the makeshift bed she'd made for him on the sofa in her office. He was exhausted. Using the Alpha command at such a young age had drained him. Gabriel stood by the window peering through the blinds. He had a handgun tucked into his waistband, silver bullets. He wasn't taking chances with wolf politics tonight. "He's coming," Gabriel said, his voice grim. 3 black SUVs, royal plates. Lorelei took a deep breath. She had known this was coming. You don't wave a stake in front of a starving lion and expect it not to pounce. "Let him in," Lorelei said. "Lorelei, if we don't let him in, he'll burn the building down, Gabriel. Let him in, but only him." Gabriel hesitated, then nodded. He walked to the front door, unlocking it with a heavy click. A moment later, the door chime rang. Dustin stepped inside. He was soaked from the rain, his tuxedo jacket gone, his white shirt clinging to his chest. He looked wrecked. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his eyes were rimmed with red. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a man who had lost everything. He stopped when he saw Gabriel blocking the path to the office. The 2 males stared at each other. One the king of the Obsidian Moon, the other a rogue protector. The air crackled with aggression. "Where are they?" Dustin asked, his voice hoarse. "Sleeping," Gabriel replied coldly. "Something they would be doing peacefully if you hadn't come here. I need to see him. You have no rights here, Dustin. He is my son." Dustin stepped forward, his fists clenching. "Is he?" Lorelei's voice cut through the tension. She stepped out of the office, closing the door softly behind her. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. She had changed out of the red dress into simple leggings and an oversized sweater. She looked small, but her eyes held a fire that could scorch the earth. "Lorelei," Dustin breathed. He took a step toward her, but stopped when she flinched. The reaction hurt him more than any physical blow. I know everything," Albright confessed. "I know you were pregnant when I sent you away." "You didn't send me away," Lorelei corrected him. "You banished me. You stripped me of my rank, my home, and my pack. You told me I was broken." "I was lied to," Dustin pleaded. "Felicity and Harrington. They falsified the records. I thought I was doing what was necessary for the lineage." "So that makes it okay?" Lorelei laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "Because you were tricked, my suffering doesn't count." "Did you know I gave birth in a motel bathtub? Dustin, did you know I almost bled out because I couldn't go to a shifter hospital without being arrested as a rogue? Gabriel saved us. He cut the cord. He warmed Noah when the heating broke." Dustin looked at Gabriel with a new expression. Jealousy, yes, but also a grudging gratitude. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Lorelei said. "You just believed the worst of me." "I want to make it right," Dustin said, dropping to his knees. It was a shocking display of submission. "Lorelei, come back. I will execute the traitors. I will reinstate you as Luna. Noah will be the crown prince. He belongs in the pack. He needs to learn to control his power." "He is controlling it just fine," Gabriel interjected. "He commanded the Royal Guard," Dustin argued, looking up at her. "That is raw power. If he isn't trained by an alpha, it will consume him. Please, for the boy's sake, let me claim him." Lorelei looked at Dustin. She saw the desperation. She knew he was right about one thing: Noah was getting too strong. Today proved that. He needed training she couldn't give him. "I won't come back as your mate," Lorelei said coldly. "That bond is dead. You broke it." "Then come back as the mother of the heir," Dustin negotiated. "Just come home." "I have a condition," Lorelei said. "Anything. A paternity test, a public one, not conducted by your doctors, conducted by the High Council. Dustin frowned. Why, I know he is mine. I can feel it. Because I want the world to know, Lorelei hissed. I want the record corrected. I want everyone who spat on me to know that I produced the strongest alpha this generation has seen, while your precious queen produced— What a weakling. Dustin flinched. We will do the test tomorrow. The next morning, the Central City Hospital was in lockdown. The High Council, the governing body of all werewolf packs, had sent their own geneticist, Dr. Evans. The waiting room was a pressure cooker. On one side sat Dustin and his frantic advisors. On the other sat Lorelei, Gabriel, and Noah. Noah was happily eating a lollipop, swinging his legs completely unaware that his blood was being analyzed to determine the fate of a kingdom. Dustin couldn't take his eyes off the boy. He wanted to go over to smell him, to touch his hair. But Gabriel sat between them like a stone wall. Finally, Dr. Evans emerged. He held a tablet. The results are conclusive, Dr. Evans announced. His voice echoed in the silent room. He looked at Dustin. King Dustin the child, Noah Tate, is a 99.9% genetic match to you. He is your biological son. Dustin let out a breath he had been holding for 12 hours. He smiled a genuine relieved smile. He turned to Lorelei. See, he is mine. He comes home with me. Read the rest, Dr. Evans, Lorelei said, her voice dry. Dr. Evans cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. However, under Section 4, Article 12 of the Shifter Constitution, the law of abandonment. Dustin's smile faded. What if a sire rejects a pregnant mate? Dr. Evans read, and banishes her from the territory, he forfeits all parental rights to any offspring resulting from that pregnancy. The rejection acts as a legal severance of the bloodline. Lorelei stood up, smoothing her skirt. She walked over to Dustin, who looked like he had been struck by lightning. Biology makes you a donor, Dustin, she whispered, leaning into his ear. But the law makes you a stranger. No, Dustin gasped. I am the king. I can overturn the law. Not council law, Gabriel said, stepping up beside Lorelei. Not even a king is above the Constitution. You threw him away before he was born. You don't get to claim him now that he's convenient. Dustin looked at Noah. The boy looked back, his grey eyes curious. I will fight this, Dustin vowed, his voice shaking. I will spend every coin in the treasury. I will burn the world down. He is my son. You can try, Lorelei said, picking Noah up. The boy wrapped his arms around her neck. But you're forgetting one thing, Dustin. What? You still have a wife. And I hear the council is very interested in why the current queen's son has no wolf. She turned and walked away, leaving Dustin trapped between the son he legally couldn't claim and the son who might not be his at all. The revelation at the hospital had turned Dustin into a man possessed. He returned to the Obsidian Palace not as a defeated father, but as a vengeful king. The law of abandonment might have stopped him from claiming Noah, but no law protected Felicity from the truth of her own deception. He kicked open the doors to the royal nursery. Nannies scrambled away, sensing the murderous aura rolling off him. Felicity was there, pacing. When she saw him, she didn't cringe. She stood tall, her eyes hard. She knew the end game was here. Get out, Dustin growled to the staff. They fled instantly. So, Felicity said, her voice brittle, the prodigal son is real. I assume you're here to toss me aside like you did her. I am here for the truth, Felicity, Dustin said, walking over to the crib where Lucas lay sleeping. The boy was cute, undeniably, but he was quiet. Too quiet. Even in sleep, a royal alpha pup should emit a low hum of energy. Lucas emitted nothing but the soft, milky scent of a human infant. "We are doing a DNA test. Now." "You don't have the authority without the council," Felicity snapped. "I am the council right now," Dustin roared. He grabbed a swab kit from the medical station the nannies kept in the room. He swiped the inside of the sleeping baby's cheek. Lucas stirred but didn't cry. "You're wasting your time," Felicity hissed, though sweat was beading on her hairline. "He is yours. He looks just like you." "He has dark hair," Dustin corrected. "That's where the resemblance ends. He has no scent, Felicity. He has no wolf." He handed the sample to a guard waiting at the door. "Run this, compare it to my markers, and run it against the database of every male in the castle." The wait was agonizing. For 2 hours, Dustin sat in the nursery watching Felicity. She smoked a cigarette, something forbidden in the nursery, her hands shaking violently. Finally, the door opened. It wasn't the doctor. It was Beta Weston. Weston looked pale. He held the tablet with the results. He walked into the room, his eyes refusing to meet Dustin's. He looked straight at Felicity. "Weston," Dustin said, narrowing his eyes. "Read it." Weston swallowed hard. "The profile. It's not a match to the king." Dustin exhaled a dark laugh bubbling in his chest. "I knew it. Who is he, Weston? Some human she picked up at a bar. Or did her father buy a baby?" "He's not human, my king," Weston whispered. "He is wolf-born. Who is the father?" Weston's hand trembled so hard the tablet rattled. He looked at Felicity, a look of desperate, terrified longing. Felicity closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. Dustin saw the look. The air left the room. He looked at his best friend, his Beta. The man who had stood by his side for 10 years. The man who had encouraged him to reject Lorelei for the good of the pack. "Weston," Dustin said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Why does the child share your chin?" Weston dropped to his knees. "Dustin, You!" Dustin roared, shifting partially, his claws extending. He backhanded Weston across the room. The Beta crashed into the wall, crumbling to the floor, bleeding. "You slept with my queen!" Dustin stalked toward him. "You convinced me to throw out my true mate, my fated mate, so you could plant your bastard in my throne. She loved me," Weston choked out, coughing up blood. "Felicity and I, we were together before you chose her. But her father, the Duke, wanted her to be queen. We couldn't stop it. We thought, if she gave you an heir, we could still be close. I could still watch my son grow up." Dustin turned to Felicity. She wasn't crying anymore. She was laughing, a manic, broken sound. "You were so obsessed with a perfect lineage," Felicity spat. "You were so cold. You deserved it. You deserved to raise another man's son." "Guards." Dustin's voice shook the foundations of the castle. A dozen enforcers rushed in. "Weston is to be executed for high treason," Dustin commanded, his face stone. "Take him to the courtyard. Do it now." "No, Dustin, please," Felicity screamed, lunging for him, but the guards held her back. "And her?" the captain of the guard asked, looking at the sobbing queen. Dustin looked at Felicity, then at the innocent baby in the crib. The baby who was now fatherless and would soon be motherless. "Strip her of her titles," Dustin said, turning his back. "Lock her in the Iron Tower until the council decides her fate. And the boy, send him to the Omega Orphanage in the eastern sector. He is innocent of their crimes, but he will not carry my name." As the screams of his former wife and best friend faded down the hallway, Dustin stood alone in the silent nursery. He had no wife. He had no heir. He had no Beta. He had destroyed his life for a lie. He walked to the window and looked out toward the city lights, toward where Lorelei and Noah were. "I'm coming for you," he whispered to the wind. "I'll burn the law if I have to." A week had passed since the execution of Beta Weston and the imprisonment of Queen Felicity. The news had shattered the werewolf community. The Obsidian scandal was all anyone talked about. But Lorelei ignored it. She was busy packing. "We have to move," she told Gabriel, folding Noah's clothes into a suitcase. "Dustin is becoming unstable. He's sent flowers, gifts, letters. He's camped out across the street for 3 nights in his SUV. He's trying to court you," Gabriel said, leaning against the doorframe, cleaning his gun. "In his twisted alpha way." "He's trying to own us," Lorelei corrected. "He lost his fake heir, so now he wants his real one. I won't let Noah become a pawn in his court." "Mommy, look." Noah ran into the room holding a toy sword. "I'm a king." Lorelei's heart squeezed. "You're better than a king, baby. You're a good boy." Suddenly the glass of the front window of the shop shattered. A canister hissed across the floor, spewing thick grey smoke. "Wolfsbane gas!" Gabriel shouted. "Lorelei, get down!" He tackled her and Noah, covering them with his body, as the acrid smoke filled the room. Coughing, Lorelei grabbed Noah, pressing a wet cloth she had been using for cleaning over his nose. "Back door!" Gabriel ordered, his eyes watering. "Go!" They scrambled toward the rear exit, but before they could reach it, the door was kicked in. 4 men in tactical gear wearing gas masks stormed in. They weren't royal guards. They wore no crests. They were mercenaries. "Grab the kid!" one of them shouted. Gabriel roared, his wolf surfacing despite the gas. He threw himself at the first attacker, snapping the man's arm. But the gas was weakening him. A second mercenary clubbed him with the butt of a rifle, and Gabriel went down hard. "Gabriel!" Lorelei screamed. She tried to run, but a mercenary grabbed her hair, yanking her back. She screamed, kicking and clawing, but he was too strong. Another man lunged for Noah. "No!" Noah screamed. His eyes glowed silver. He unleashed a sonic cry, a clumsy alpha command. "Stop!" The mercenaries faltered for a second, their knees bending, but they were wearing dampeners, earpieces designed to block alpha frequencies. "Grab him." "The Duke wants him alive," the leader yelled. The Duke, Harrington, Felicity's father. He was cleaning up loose ends. Lorelei was thrown against the wall, her head hitting the plaster with a sickening crack. Her vision swam. She watched helplessly as the man grabbed Noah. Noah bit the man's hand, his little fangs drawing blood, but he was just a toddler. "Let him go!" A voice thundered from the street. The front of the shop exploded inward. A massive black wolf, larger than any normal alpha, crashed through the debris. Dustin. He didn't shift back to human form. He was a whirlwind of fur teeth and rage. He hit the mercenary, holding Noah with the force of a freight train, his jaws clamping around the man's throat. There was a wet crunch, and the man dropped. Dustin stood over Noah, snarling, his hackles raised, blood dripping from his muzzle. He was a monster, a nightmare made flesh. The other 3 mercenaries opened fire. Bullets tore into Dustin's flank and shoulder. He didn't even flinch. He lunged again, tearing through them with a brutality that Lorelei had never seen. He wasn't fighting like a king. He was fighting like a father protecting his young. Within seconds, the room was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the black wolf and Noah's terrified sobbing. Dustin shifted back. He was naked, bleeding heavily from 3 gunshot wounds in his chest and stomach. He stumbled, falling to one knee. "Noah," Dustin wheezed, reaching out a bloody hand. "Is he safe?" Lorelei crawled over, pulling Noah into her arms. The boy was shaking, buried in her chest. She looked at Dustin. The silver bullets were already poisoning him. His healing wasn't kicking in. "He's safe," Lorelei whispered, shock trembling in her voice. You came." "I told you." Dustin coughed, blood spilling from his lips. "I was watching." Gabriel groaned from the floor, pulling himself up. He looked at the carnage, then at Dustin. "He's got silver in his lungs," Gabriel assessed, grimly limping over. "If we don't get those bullets out, he's dead in 10 minutes. Lorelei looked at the man who had ruined her life, the man who had rejected her, but also the man who had just taken 3 bullets for their son, without hesitation. "Help him," Lorelei commanded Gabriel. "Lorelei, help him," she screamed. "He saved Noah." Gabriel cursed, but knelt down, pulling a knife from his boot. "Hold him down. This is going to hurt." As Gabriel dug the first bullet out, Dustin screamed his hand, gripping the floorboards until the wood splintered. Lorelei found herself reaching out, taking his other hand. "Look at me," she said, her voice shaking. "Focus on me, Dustin. Don't you dare die." Dustin's eyes, hazy with pain, locked onto hers. He squeezed her hand weakly. "I never stopped," he gasped. "Even when I hated you, I loved you." Lorelei felt a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. "Save your breath, Alpha," she said, softly, wiping blood from his forehead. "You have a lot of groveling left to do." As the sirens of the Royal Guard, finally alerted by the noise, wailed in the distance, Lorelei sat amidst the wreckage of her shop, holding her son and the hand of the dying king. The secret was out. The war had come to her doorstep. And for the first time in 3 years, the pack was in the same room. The sterile beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the Royal Medical Wing. Dustin lay in the center of the bed, his skin pale against the stark white sheets. The silver bullets had been removed, but the poison had ravaged his system. His healing factor was fighting a losing battle against the toxin that had sat in his blood for too long. Lorelei sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside him, her hand resting near his, but not touching it. Noah was asleep on a cot in the corner, guarded by Gabriel, who sat with his back to the wall, eyes open and alert. "He's stabilizing," Gabriel said quietly, his voice rough from the smoke inhalation during the attack. "But he's weak, weaker than an alpha should be." "He took 3 bullets, Gabriel," Lorelei murmured, looking at Dustin's chest, heavily bandaged. "He shielded Noah with his body. He didn't even hesitate." "I know," Gabriel admitted, a hint of respect in his tone. "I didn't think he had it in him. I thought he was just a suit with a crown. But that was pure instinct." Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the medical wing burst open. It wasn't an assassin this time. It was the captain of the guard, looking frantic. "My lady," the captain gasped, bowing to Lorelei. It was the first time anyone in the castle had addressed her with a title in 3 years. "We have a problem. Duke Harrington has convened the High Council." Lorelei stood up. "On what grounds?" "He claims the king is incapacitated and dying. He claims the heir is illegitimate due to the law of abandonment. He is calling for a vote of no confidence. He intends to seize the regency for himself until a suitable successor is found." "He wants the throne," Gabriel growled, standing up. He failed to kill the boy, so now he's killing the king's rule, legally. Lorelei looked down at Dustin. He was unconscious, defenseless. If Harrington took power, his first act would be to execute Dustin in his sleep and hunt down Noah. "I won't let him," Lorelei said, her voice turning to steel. "You can't stop the council," the captain said. "Only a royal can address the floor. You are... well, technically, you are a rogue." Lorelei walked over to the wardrobe, where Dustin's ceremonial clothes hung. She reached past them and pulled out a long black cloak, lined with silver fur, the mantle of the Luna. It had been hanging there, untouched since the day she was banished. Felicity had never worn it. It hadn't fit her. Lorelei threw the heavy cloak over her shoulders. It settled on her frame, as if it had been waiting for her. "I am not a rogue," she said, her eyes flashing gold. "I am the mother of the blood heir, and I am going to the council." The council chamber was a circular amphitheater of ancient stone. 12 elders sat on raised podiums looking down at the center of the room, where Duke Harrington stood. He was dressed in immaculate grey silk, looking every bit the grieving statesman. "It is a tragedy," Harrington was saying, his voice smooth as oil. "King Dustin has fallen. His judgment was clouded by a rogue witch. He brought an illegitimate bastard into our court and allowed his queen to be slandered. And now he lies dying, struck down by his own recklessness." "And the boy?" Elder Thomas asked. "The one with the Alpha Command, a genetic anomaly." Harrington waved a hand dismissively. "Or a trick. Regardless, under the law of abandonment, the king has no heir. The throne is vacant. As the highest-ranking noble and father of the former queen, I offer to steward the pack until order is restored." "I second the motion," a corrupt elder from the Southern Territory chimed in. "Let us vote." Harrington smiled. "All in favor of instating Duke Harrington as Lord Regent." Hands began to raise. 1, 2, 3. "I object." The voice rang out clear and piercing, silencing the room. The doors at the top of the amphitheater slammed open. Lorelei stood there, flanked by Gabriel and the captain of the guard. She wore the Luna's mantle, and she held Noah by the hand. Harrington's face twisted into a snarl. "Remove this filth. This is a closed session." "I am Lorelei Tate," she announced, descending the stairs. Every step echoed. "True mate of the Alpha King, mother of Noah the Crown Prince, and I am here to testify." "You have no standing," Harrington shouted. "You were rejected, and you are a traitor," Lorelei countered, stopping in the center of the pit. She looked up at the elders. "Duke Harrington hired mercenaries to assassinate my son and the king. They attacked my home 3 days ago. They used wolfsbane gas and silver bullets." "Lies!" Harrington screamed. "Proof! Where is your proof?" "The proof is in the blood on the king's chest," Lorelei said calmly. "And in the confession of the mercenary leader, we captured a Levem." Gabriel stepped forward, dragging a bound man in tactical gear. He threw the man onto the stone floor. "Tell them," Gabriel growled. The mercenary, battered and terrified, looked at the council. "It was the Duke. He paid us 50,000 to kill the kid and the woman. He said the king was collateral damage." A gasp went through the council. The hands that had been raised for Harrington slowly lowered. Harrington looked around, seeing his support crumbling. He reached into his jacket. "I won't let a peasant girl ruin me," he shrieked. He pulled out a silver-plated revolver and leveled it at Lorelei. "No!" The roar didn't come from Gabriel. It came from the entrance. Dustin stood there. He was leaning heavily against the doorframe, his hospital gown visible under a hastily thrown-on trench coat. His face was grey sweat pouring down his temples, still dangling from his arm, but his eyes were burning with unadulterated alpha fury. "Dustin!" Harrington faltered, the gun shaking. Dustin didn't speak. He pushed off the door frame. He stumbled, but he kept moving. Every step was agony, but he forced himself forward, his gaze locked on the man threatening his family. "Drop it," Dustin rasped. "You're dying," Harrington yelled, aiming the gun at Dustin now. "Stay back." Dustin smiled, a bloody, terrifying grin. "I am the Alpha King. I don't die until the moon goddess tells me to." Harrington pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed deafeningly, but the bullet didn't hit Dustin. Noah, standing beside Lorelei, had raised his hand. The air in front of Dustin shimmered. The bullet hung suspended in mid-air, caught in a telekinetic shield of pure alpha pressure. The council stared in horror and awe. A 3-year-old was stopping a bullet. Noah dropped his hand, and the bullet clattered harmlessly to the floor. "Bad man," Noah said, frowning. Dustin took the final step, reaching Harrington. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He grabbed the Duke by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. "You tried to kill my son," Dustin whispered, his voice audible to everyone in the silent room. "You tried to kill my mate, and you tried to take my crown. Mercy." Harrington gagged. "The law of abandonment," Dustin said, looking at the elders. "You are so fond of laws, Harrington. Do you know the penalty for high treason against the crown?" "Death," the head elder intoned solemnly. Dustin squeezed. There was a sickening crack, and Duke Harrington went limp. Dustin dropped the body like a sack of flour. The king turned to the council. He swayed, his vision blurring. He looked at Lorelei, who was running toward him. Dustin started, but his legs gave out. He collapsed into Lorelei's arms, the adrenaline finally fading, leaving only the darkness. Three weeks later, the private garden of the royal palace was in full bloom. It was a stark contrast to the winter snow that had defined the worst day of Lorelei's life 3 years ago. Dustin sat on a stone bench watching Noah chase a butterfly near the fountain. The king was still recovering, using a cane to walk, but the color had returned to his face. Lorelei walked out onto the terrace carrying 2 cups of tea. She sat beside him. "He has energy," Dustin said, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Gabriel is teaching him how to track scents. He found the kitchen staff's hidden stash of cookies in under 5 minutes. He's your son," Lorelei said, handing him the tea. "Stubborn and always hungry." Dustin's smile faded. He turned to look at her. "Lorelei." "Dustin." "I repealed the law," he said. "The council fought me, but after what Noah did, they didn't have a choice. The law of abandonment is gone. He is legitimized. He is the crown prince." "That's good," Lorelei said, sipping her tea. "And Felicity, she has been exiled to the wastelands. She will never hurt us again." "Good. So," Dustin took a deep breath, "what happens now? To us?" Lorelei looked out at the garden. "You hurt me, Dustin. You broke me in a way that doesn't just heal with an apology or a grand gesture. You didn't trust me." "I know," Dustin said, looking down at his hands. "I will spend the rest of my life making up for it. I will court you. I will sleep on the floor. I will give you the moon if you ask for it. Just don't take him away. Don't take yourself away." Lorelei looked at him. She saw the arrogance that was gone, replaced by humility. She saw the scars on his chest where he had taken bullets for them. "I'm not going anywhere," Lorelei said softly. Dustin looked up, hope flaring in his eyes. "You're staying." "Gabriel is going back to his pack. He says his job is done," Lorelei said. "But Noah needs his father, and I think the kingdom needs a Luna who actually knows what it's like to be an outsider." She reached out, taking his hand. It was warm. The sparks, the fated mate sparks, were still there, faint but undeniable. "But we are not back together," Lorelei warned, narrowing her eyes. "You are on probation, Alpha King. You are courting me from scratch. First date, flowers, the whole 9 yards. And if you mess up, I have a very powerful son who can stop bullets." Dustin laughed, a sound of pure relief. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Challenge accepted," he whispered. "Daddy, look!" Noah yelled, holding up a frog he had caught. Dustin stood up, wincing slightly but ignoring the pain. He walked toward his son, his limp noticeable, but his head held high. Lorelei watched them, the Alpha King and the Alpha Prince, and finally, for the first time in years, she let herself exhale. The winter was over. The spring had finally come, and that is the story of how a rejected rogue brought a kingdom to its knees, and how an Alpha King learned that true power isn't about bloodlines or laws. It's about love, trust, and the willingness to burn the world down for your family. Lorelei went from being a broken vessel to the most powerful woman in the realm, proving that sometimes the rejection is just the universe's way of preparing you for a greater destiny. Do you think Lorelei should have forgiven Dustin so easily? Or should she have made him grovel for another 10 years? And what about Gabriel? Did he deserve a better ending? Let me know in the comments below. If you are Team Dustin, comment Alpha King. If you are Team Gabriel, comment Rogue Protector. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next episode of intense werewolf romance dramas. Thanks for watching.